You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now, your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I'm your host, Koku. Pleasure to be here today. Let's get into today's show. Well, before we get into today's show, let me give my free business shout-out. Free business shout-out goes to Stephanie Renee's Salon, located at 1614 West Main Street in Kalamazoo, Michigan. The zip code there is 49006. You can reach Stephanie Renee's Salon at 269-459-6535. That's 269-459-6535. They're conveniently located inside Cali Beauty. Next up is amymarie.maven.com. That's AMYMARIE.MAYVENN.com. They also deal in natural hair care products. Their mission is to provide high-quality products with unparalleled shopping experience, world-class technology and hair care products, etc. You can find them at amymarie.maven.com. Next up is Melanated Conscious Society. You heard me talking to Kepra L on my podcast several weeks back. You could find them at www.melanatedconscioussociety.com. Melanatedconscioussociety.com is a mentor Black community empowerment organization in Jacksonville, Florida. Make sure to follow them on all social media platforms. And if you have a skill or talent related to marketing, like social media marketing or graphics, or whatever you can do, or reach out to them and offer your assistance. It's for a good cause. It's organizing for our people. Lastly, Glennae Davis on Twitter. She could be reached at GLENNAERN@gmail.com. I'll just read what she sent me. She said, "Hello, thanks for your reply. I'm Glennae Davis, an LA-based registered nurse, author of a critically acclaimed memoir, Yet Here I Stand, creator and chief nurse of Nave's Vision, a healthcare media empire where we provide the healthcare education and planning to bridge the gaps of knowledge between discriminated, disadvantaged people facing employment discrimination and the healthcare industry, resulting in having a strategic plan with the medical support they need to no longer be victimized, merchandised, or marginalized by the system." I currently have 2 products available for your listeners. Number 1 is the memoir, and number 2, a free health checklist. So guys, if you're listening, make sure reach out to Glennae Davis. Once again, her email address is GLENNAERN@gmail.com. In addition to the free business shout out, take a listen to this.
Greetings, Bitter Medicine supporters. It's Caramel Yogi, aka Tamika, the creator of Victorious Ones LLC, where we help single parents find peace and harmony through meditation and vinyasa yoga. Visit Caramel Yogi on IG or send an email to caramelyogi@gmail.com. CARAMELYOGI. We will help you stay on your path of peace and harmony.
So, now we're into today's topic. And in today's topic, the truth of the matter is, I have a huge issue with many of you. In my last show, I talked about my open invitation to the Bitter Medicine think tank, which we already have about a dozen people in the think tank. It's a WhatsApp group, so it doesn't even require you to appear anywhere. It's free to join. You just have to follow certain guidelines, and you have to have something to say, something to offer to the discussion. But aside from you guys who listen to the show and who are part of the think tank, I received a grand total of 0 inquiries to the think tank. 0. I spent about an hour in that last show saying to you that you should be concerned about the education that your children are receiving. Your black children are receiving an education that separates them from their community and their African traditions. That should scare you. And the fact that we don't have a large array of African-centered education, schools, should really bother you. And for those of you who are in consciousness, who knows that, maybe it's kind of too late. I have these, preteens on my hands and there's no African-centered school around me. What do I do? Well, as I spoke about in that last broadcast, you can join the think tank, help us devise a curriculum, a reading list, certain activities, etc., that can supplement African children with an African-centered education outside of the common schools that they have to go to. And in fact, in many ways, what you would be doing is defining culture. That's really what you'd be doing. You'd be defining culture. And again, this is for those of you who listen and who are not a part of the think tank. The fact that no one has inquired tells me or makes me think no one cares. I talk about the book, The Miseducation of the Negro, often. That book was written about 100 years ago. And the problem still stands. You send your children to these schools and they learn about Greco-Roman history. They learn about the United States, a distorted view of how the United States came to be. How their ancestors came to America as people seeking and searching out opportunities, as farmers. No, they came here because the savage white man stole them from Africa. But it seems to me that you're perfectly fine with your children and grandchildren and relatives receiving just that education and nothing else. And a part of the problem, and that's what today's show is about, a part of the problem is you don't take a scientific approach or a scientific outlook to everyday life. Black folks are the worst at that. We leave the scientific approaches, the scientific questions, the hypotheses, etc. We leave all of that to white people. Either A, we believe white people are some great group that B, will share all the knowledge of the world with us Because see, there isn't any racism, there isn't any whites organizing against you. There isn't an impending genocide coming your way. That's what a lot of you out here walking around acting like. In today's show, I want to beg you. That's right. I want to beg you to begin looking at the world a little bit more scientifically. Because guess what? White folks look at the world scientifically all the time. All the time. When America was going through world wars and Vietnamese wars and stuff like that, their scientists were researching better warfare. They don't just reach to these places haphazardly. That's what we do. And that's why we're losing. You see, you're out there and you're hoping that, well, I'm conscious. My kids are, they're going through the same common education that I went through. So they'll find their way to consciousness too. Yeah, but by that time, they might be ruined already. Just like you are. They're ruined. You're ruined already. The only way to fix yourself is to fix the next generation coming up. And by taking an active role and an active stand in what the next generation is going to face, that's how you fix yourself. That's how you cement your legacy for the future. You have to fix yourself today and help guide these children of tomorrow. And it has to start with a scientific outlook on the world. Black people, we got to think science a little bit more. Some of you hear me saying think science and you think I'm talking about walking around with a head full of equations and theorems and factoids and no, proofs and all that kind of stuff. Nah, I'm not talking about that. Scientific thinking doesn't differ much more from the sort of reasoning tools you use in your everyday life now. But scientific thinking takes it a step further. For example, you might look at a magician perform a trick where he saws someone in half. Now, naturally, most times you see that trick, you've seen it since you were a child. You try to figure out what happened. How did they do that? Right? You may start to say, maybe there's a trap door or something. Right? Maybe, there's a hidden compartment or something. Maybe it's two people and it's not one person. So what does your mind start to do? You start to seek out more evidence. You look to see if it's big enough for two people or, you look for more evidence. You seek it out. And along the way, if you're good at it, you'll come up with some new explanation for the mystery. Maybe you might think about it and say, I think they used a mirror. Or I think they used a child, a smaller sized person to make it look like it was one whole person. Maybe it was two children. That's scientific thinking. And like I said, we tend to do that in our everyday reasoning. But what we don't do it. Number one, we don't do it enough. We don't scrutinize all the topics of life. We don't, and most importantly, and I talked about this when I spoke about the Asa G. Hilliard paper. Well, let me find that paper. Asa said something very interesting. He said that he was talking about the state of African education. And his last point of 12, he says, we have no regular independent communication capabilities such as serious national and international periodicals to address our serious and continuing problems. He goes on to say this is shameful. It is not really a matter of resources, it's a matter of consciousness. Appropriate socialization will produce an appetite among the masses of our people for appropriate information. So you see, guys, it's not just sufficient to say you're conscious of what's going on around you or you're woke to the realities of life around you, but are you every day following a scientific approach to the problems that face not only you as an individual or your family, but all of us as a community? And we're not doing that. We're failing at that. We're failing at it. There are hard questions to answer in life. And the way we approach black solutions to our black problems will determine if we get the best outcomes. At a fundamental level, it's the same way scientists approach any problem they face. We black people need to apply science to our everyday lives and demand that those making decisions on our behalf think scientifically as well. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's go back to the civil rights movement. Shoot, it's not that far behind us, number one. And number two, we still do a lot of the same shit we did during the civil rights movement. We still march and talk about boycotts and all this stuff. That's the same shit they was doing 50 years ago, 60 years ago, right? We're still doing it. So let's go back to that era. Let's go back to our two named leaders during that era. We had Malcolm X and we had Martin Luther King Jr. None of them took a scientific approach to finding solutions to our problems. None of them did. They took a religious approach. And I can hear you now. Oh, he's about to start talking about religion again. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. But I want to point out to you, if you go back and you look at the civil rights movement, it was mostly a Christian movement on one side and a Muslim movement on the other, and science was nowhere to be found. Because let's take MLK for a second. Had MLK taken a scientific approach to the problem, MLK would have known beforehand, or would have realized beforehand, that integration would be damnation. Let me say that again. Had MLK taken a scientific approach or taken a scientific survey of what they were asking for, which was integration, he would have known that integration, in fact, all of our people would have known that integration was going to be damnation. Because what happened when we integrated? Well, we lost all our independent schools. Where we had black principals in black schools, they became janitors in these integrated schools. Teachers the same. And so now our black children, where they had an opportunity in those black schools to learn some black history, black, African-centered education, now they were in the integrated schools learning about the Romans and the Greeks. We have to be better. In fact, we have to look at the civil rights movement scientifically as well. The hypothesis in the civil rights movement was to show them your suffering in hopes that they have a change of heart. How did that work out? When we crunch the numbers, when we look at the statistics, how did that work out? We're arguably worse off after civil rights than we were before. So I'm begging you, take a scientific approach to looking at life. Most of us in the black community, we like to go with our gut instinct and faith, right? Oh, is this where he starts talking about religion now? No, I'm not going to talk about religion at all. But that's what we do. We go with our gut instinct, and it's usually something faith-based. Instead, what you need to do is to gather as much information as you can, all the possible options, outcomes, and how they relate to your specific situation. Weigh out the pros and cons. And you will find that your research will probably counter what your gut tells you. Doing it independently is great, but doing it in a group is even greater. If everyone in a group is looking at specific problems, looking at all the possible options, outcomes, as they relate to the specific situation that we're in, as subjugated people, and we weigh out the pros and cons, that research combined will counter foolish, faith-based solutions, and it'll probably, not all the time, sometimes they might align, but it'll probably go against your gut instinct. I mean, after all, what is a gut instinct? And I offered you an open invitation to such a place where a bunch of us are already conscious, right? Where a bunch of you who will be coming in as conscious people who understand that we have a black problem and we need a black solution to rectify the problem. A place that's comfortable for people to interact, to share ideas, to form groups and tackle specific problems at a time in light of our situation as a subjugated people, as a people on the brink of being genocide, being killed off. And none of you respond. None of you. And my podcast is posted in big groups on Facebook, like John Henry Clark, groups like that. And people like my postings and this, that, and the other. Sometimes they even comment on it, but none of you have inquired any further on how can I join. I've asked people to tag educators, to tag African-centered school educators. Nothing. And a part of that is because you guys don't value science. You don't value a scientific approach to life. You don't value what people actively searching for solutions and a scientific, you don't value it. Instead, what you guys value is sitting around repeating slogans. You know, John Henry Clark once said that we have no friends. Yeah, I know. I've heard that shit for years now. You know, Malcolm X always talked about who taught you to hate yourself. Yeah, I know. I saw the video. You know, MLK had a dream. Yeah, forget that dream. That's the problem. We go off of gut instincts and dreams and faith-based. Nah. We got to get down and dirty, and we got to have a scientific approach to solving our problems. And look, maybe you don't understand what, maybe you don't understand how to think science. And before this show ends, I'm going to talk to you about how to think science. I'm going to end with some solutions on how to think science. But in the meantime, if you're not too sure of your own, ability or what have you, seek out those who have more expertise, who have devoted their lives to this. For example, I have never made a curriculum before. I've taught. I'm an adjunct professor, but I've never sat down from scratch and made a curriculum before, especially an African-centered one. But my spirit tells me, and my research scientifically tells me, that we don't have an education system for African people or people of African descent. And that informs me and shows me why we're in such a messed up place, because if we don't care about Africa and African-centered knowledge, who else is going to care? No one. So it's on us. We can't have Fortune 500 companies using our brains and our talent to build their companies and make them buku dollars, while Africa is being exploited, while we are being killed in the streets, shot in our apartments, chilling. We can't be doing that, but we do it because our education pushed us or directed us towards doing that. White folks, pathetic as they are killing you, damn it, even in your own apartment. In a place that should be safe to you, they're running up in there, shooting you, and then making up cockamamie stories. And you know what you're doing? You're going along with the cockamamie story, or you're going along with the simplest reason that you could think of as to why these types of things are happening. And I'm going to talk more about that cop situation in a second. You know the one I'm talking about. But like I said, seek out the professionals. Seek out the people with the expertise. I don't know how to create an African-centered curriculum. I'm not a traditional educator. I'm definitely not what they call what we would call in the Caribbean a primary school teacher or something like that. I'm not any of those things. So I need to seek out people who have experience in these things. I need to seek out policymakers, people who have written legislation. I need to talk to those people too, because as I discussed on a previous broadcast, one where I did a crossover show with Oni Tase. In fact, it was the episode where we discussed LeBron James's school. We briefly touched on the fact that even homeschooling a child, there's certain things you're just not allowed to do according to Whitey's system. So you could decide to keep your children home and homeschool them, and it could still be extremely problematic. So we need the people who understand these bills and laws and stuff like that, who could break that down too. We have to work together. This is the scientific approach. You get people who have expertise to help guide you towards where you need to be. And the thing about people with expertise is that as a professional, your knowledge base constantly grows. And as it does, the best course of action that was, good enough 5 years ago may completely have changed by now. So knowledge changes over time. This is why you can't go off of, for example, civil rights thinking. And this is what you do all the time. Protesting, marching, boycotting, that may have been okay back then. Maybe it had some sauce to it. But is that good enough for us now? No. We're stuck doing the same things they did in civil rights. As if Whitey hasn't changed and in some cases intensified their organizing against you or their oppression of you. They're slaving you out. We're acting like they're the same white folks with the same tactics. No. So you got to get professionals who keep the knowledge base growing, and so that we don't get stuck finding solutions to 5, 10, 15, 25-year-old problems. But even still, you as a thinking person, you should be able to bring some knowledge to the table when seeking out the expert. You yourself have to be open to new information, to the possibility that maybe the civil rights guys had it all wrong. Maybe we today follow in that same template, that same mold. Maybe we have it all wrong for today. And this is how scientists view the world. This is how scientists view the world. Scientists have to constantly question assumptions and prior conclusions. And so this is what I need from you guys, to take a scientific approach to the world. And the leaders that you guys choose to follow have to also take a scientific approach to the world. What a lot of our people do, especially those who are allowed to be vocal, to have huge followings and stuff like that, those folks tend to like to go with the facts that support whatever previously held position that they have, right? I mentioned the white female cop who ran up in a black man's apartment and shot him, claiming later that she thought she was in her own apartment and she thought he was a burglar and stuff like that. And a lot of you guys on social media, Facebook in particular, were arguing with me that he had to be sleeping with her. Is a relationship gone wrong? She got digmatized and then got upset. No. That's the simplest thing. That's the Housewives of Atlanta kind of thinking, right? That's like reality TV thinking, right? It's the simplest thing, right? No. Take a scientific approach to that situation. I talked about this on Twitter. Some of you might be familiar with it. The guy, Botham Jean, is a St. Lucian guy, a Caribbean guy like myself, living in an apartment above a pathetic white woman who happens to be a cop. if you know anything about Caribbean people, you know we like our music. I mean, black folks in America like their music too, but you know we like our music, and a lot of people who are non-Caribbean don't like our music, particularly pathetic white females who happen to be a cop. A pathetic white female who's emboldened with a gun and a badge. He's over her head, and from what I understand, she owns a dog. The dog probably was riled up over the music, etc. She killed that man, I bet you. Now, the thing is that this truth won't ever really come out because it's so ridiculous, right? We saw a similar case just a few years ago where a white guy pulls up next to some black guys who are blasting some music, and he pulls out a gun and shoots a kid or something like that in the car. I think they did give him time, that white piece of shit. I think they gave him some time in prison for what he did. But it's so ridiculous that you would go and kill this man. You worked your 15-hour shift, and you probably said to yourself, if you think I going home to listen to some soca or compa or whatever upstairs there, you're kidding. And so that's premeditated murder. But that truth will probably never come out because it's so ridiculous a thing to do and so pathetic a thing to do that the police department down there, they don't want that to come out. They don't want that to come out. So they'll do all sorts of things like what they've been doing, which is scientific on their part. Oh, we found some weed inside his house. Okay, so you make that national news. There was some weed in his house. Now, all the white folks who are going to serve on a jury, who are probably all pro-white anyway and pro-cop, because cops are killing black folks, now he's a weed head? It's science. They've studied it. They know the key words and phrases and items to put out there to sway jurors ahead of time. You know how many white folks in that part of Texas are saying, well, he was just an old weed head. Who knows what else he might have done? Maybe it was a good thing she took him off the streets. It's scientific. They're using science against you. But all you want to think about, well, he must have been dicking her down, and he decided to stop dicking her down, so she killed him. Yep, that sounds good. That's all you're going with. And it's since come out, the parents of the, Botham Jean has said he didn't have no relationship with this woman. He didn't know her. And still there's some people fighting me on Facebook and stuff telling me he had to be in a relationship with her. He was sleeping with her. And that's because you're not scientific minded. I'm going to take a commercial break here, and on the other side, I'm going to tell you a story that you may have heard on Oni Tase's most recent podcast from the Pro-Black Perspective podcast. And I'm going to show you how science is used in another form against us, okay? I want you guys to hold on. I'll be right back after these messages.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the Pro-Black Perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions. Black people face one problem: the problem of ignorance. This is why those who opposed us stole us from our parents, disconnected us from our continent, and enforced on us illiteracy. But now the ignorance is self-inflicted. We send our children to their machines. We detach ourselves from our motherland, and we don't read meaningful literature. Consciousness is a series of stages. The sooner we get to one, the sooner we are ready for the higher. The pro-black compendium accelerates the beginner to the advanced and provides for the advanced an unparalleled breadth. This is the sort of book your enemies do not want you to read, but our ancestors would insist you read twice.
Peace seeker. This is only from the pro-black perspective, and we need power. Power will not be handed to us. We need to build power. But in order to build power, we need a power blueprint. You need to study the best blueprints available. You have Garbage. You have Wilson's. You have Williams. You have mine. Now, you'll have Cooks. Carlos A. Cooks was Garvey's best student, the greatest mind in the world from 1940 to 1966. Yes, the greatest. Yet Whitey doesn't want you to read his blueprint. Cook's blueprint isn't religious. Cook's isn't for integration. Cook's isn't for communism. Cook's isn't even for anti-blacks. Cook's blueprint is for Africa. And Cook's blueprint is the unknown blueprint that was the basis of black power as we know it today. When you say buy black, you're talking about Cooks. When you say black is beautiful, you're talking about Cooks. When you say Malcolm got something right, you're talking about Cooks. But Cook's blueprint was lost, and Whitey is hiding that blueprint behind a $1,000 paywall. He's hiding solutions from you, telling you you need to take out a small loan to get the information that can liberate you. Whitey does not want you to have solutions to your problems, but you need solutions. You need power. I will give you the Carlos A. Cooks Reader, valued over $1,000 at a 98% discount, $15. Send $15 to cash.me/$ABS only with the subject Carlos and your email address, and I'll send you the ebook. We need power. You need blueprints. Start building today.
Greetings, family. This is Koku, host of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. In case you didn't know, we have an online book club called the Bitter Medicine Book Club. Every month, we will select a book to inspire the Bitter Medicine Podcast listening audience to read along together. At the end of the month, we will have a call-in show and book discussion. This is a great, dynamic way for readers to not only enjoy a book, but also have others to bounce ideas off of. They say if you want to keep anything away from black people, put it in a book. Don't allow this to be true. Head over to bittermedicineblogs.com and subscribe to our newsletter for important updates. Do that today. Join our reading collective today and empower yourselves, your family, and your community. Peace and blessings.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
I'm not going to sugarcoat it with you guys, but I'm very disappointed. As I said in the first segment, the fact that I have extended this open invitation and I outlined what I'm looking for in terms of membership and what we, I put it out there what it is we were trying to do. We're trying to, at the very least, supplement your child's education with an African-centered curriculum that you can employ at home. We're trying to add some structure to African culture here in the Americas. And the fact that absolutely no one sent an email, hey, Koku, Bitter Medicine Podcast, how can I be a part of this? It's exactly the problem that we're facing. And you know what's so crazy about it is, down the road, when they're walking us into the gas chambers, when they're walking us before the firing squads, when they're chaining us to the post, there'll be some of you or your descendants who'll be saying, how come no one warned us that this might happen? How come no one ever told us anything? How do we end up here? And the answer is because you failed. The answer is because you didn't want to get involved. It was too much for you to send an email, to send a DM, to inbox me, whatever. Post a comment under the video, under that previous podcast video on YouTube. It was just too much. Oh, that's too much to do. New Nikes come out. You're going to go camping for that shit. You'll drop buku dollars on that. I'm inviting you to something free. Something for your children. But you know what's really the problem? And I've talked about this several times on various broadcasts, but black folks they have this thing about them, or we have this thing about us of let the next generation handle that. I'll just kick the ball down the road a little bit. Let the next generation deal with it. And it's because your ancestors failed you and you had to start from scratch. You think that that's a part of black culture, that everyone starts from scratch. That you're not supposed to work too hard for the next generation. All you're supposed to do is the low energy shit that you've been doing. Feed children, you clothe them, you give them somewhere to sleep, you give them some recreational activities, some games, some this, that, and the other. You buy them the latest Jordans so no one could clown them in school. And you think you're doing it. You think you did your part. But you haven't. I've been talking about how we as black people in the black community worldwide, we need to have more of a scientific approach to life. Because white folks have a scientific approach to you. Believe that. They know your tendencies for spending, what you spend it on. They know your social media tendencies, what you post, when you post, what times you post. Matter of fact, let me tell you all a story. If you listen to the Pro-Black Perspective podcast on KWAZ radio with his host, Oni Tase, Oni was breaking it down in his last show how his podcast in particular, but he mentioned Minds as well, because Minds has been banned in certain regions. My social media, like a lot of pro-black voices, has been silenced for arbitrary amounts of time. But Onitase was talking about his podcast, and he was relating this story to his listeners about one of his listeners, I guess in the Midwest, was trying to listen to the latest, one of the latest broadcasts from the pro-black perspective, and it was banned in the Midwest. The listener couldn't listen to it. It was banned in the Midwest. Onitase was oblivious to this. He didn't know. Mixcloud, the platform where where all of the pro-black perspective podcast is posted, as well as YouTube. But on Mixcloud never told him he was being banned in particular regions of the world or the country. It took a listener to tell him. Now, here's the thing about that. Because we're not scientifically minded as a people, we rely on Whitey to give us analytics, right? Like, for example, when I went to start this podcast, I researched podcasting. When I dropped my first few episodes, I researched when is it the best time to promote your podcast on social media. Well, who do you think I was forced to go to get some information? White folks. There's no black resource that could give me the guideline to say, hey, as black YouTubers or black social media personalities or what have you, black podcasters, it's best you post on this day of the week at this time. You doing pro-black podcasts? It's best you keep it to this length or to that. Instead, the resources I found again were for white folks by white folks. So they give you these analytics of when it's best to post, when it's best, what's the best duration times and stuff like that. They give you the shit that works for them because they study their shit. They get experts in, statisticians, what have you, to crunch these numbers. Big data specialists crunch it down. So now Walmart knows that if they're going to post a sale, they know when to post it to your social media. They know when to email you, what time of day is best, what days of the week are best to hold the sale, what's the best prices on the widgets. They have life. They approach it scientifically. And so with Onitase, I put together, using my scientific mind, I realized something. When I look at my analytics from my podcast, social media pages, I realized that on Instagram, for example, my biggest listeners come from New York City. Second is Los Angeles. Third, Chicago. Now, I'm just making an assumption here, but I would guess that Onitase has a similar breakdown for his podcast as I have for mine. New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago. Onitase will probably have others from from the continent and stuff like that too. Right? But New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. Where is Chicago? Koku, I think Chicago is it's in the Midwest. Chicago's in the Midwest. Who are the people who would benefit heavily from the instructions and the insight that Onitase or myself is putting down in our respective podcasts? Koku, I guess you're trying to say Chicago? Yes. I'm saying Chicago. A place like Chicago will benefit greatly from our voices. So Onitase's podcast, the Pro Black Perspective podcast, would be banned in Chicago. And the particular broadcast, the episode that was banned, was about Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey in Chicago? In present-day Chicago? From an Onitase? They don't want Chicagoans to hear that. They don't want to lose their meal ticket. Yeah, I hear you complaining about another white cop killing a black guy in his apartment. But what about the black on black crime in Chicago? They don't want to give that up. So they will ban an Onitase in Chicago. If more of you start to get involved with the Bitter Medicine podcast and Bitter Medicine blogs and Bitter Medicine think tank and all these things I'm trying to do for and with my people, black people, people of African descent around the globe, much less this country, Whitey will get an idea that, you know what, I need to ban him too. And that's what you don't get. You think sitting around and, talking about stuff without a scientific approach to it, you think that's the solution. Or you think listening to, some of the public black voices that they push out there, that they allow you to listen to, when most of these guys are just entertainers. Cynthia G, entertainer. Tariq Nasheed, entertainer. Umar Johnson, entertainer. Moise Watkins, entertainers. And those latter two didn't start out as entertainers, but they realized that black people like friggin' entertainment. So they've become entertainers and hustlers too. Like I said, I want to offer solutions in these broadcasts. And the solutions I want to offer is simple. Be more science-minded, think science in everyday life. Apply scientific principles to your problems, to our problems as a community. Apply the scientific method. Scientific method is a stepwise way of analyzing a situation. And I'll probably do a whole show on the scientific method in the future. Also, if you're going to be, science-minded, be honest. Don't distort the facts to promote some ideology or some agenda that you have. And this is what we have going on in the black community. So we have a lot of black folks putting out material that promotes our ancient African history. And they do it claiming that they want you to know your ancient African history and the greatness that you have had in the past to help revitalize your thinking and energize you into striving for better. And that sounds real noble, but where a lot of these guys mess up is you start distorting facts to promote that agenda. For example, now people are going to say I'm hating. Is he about to talk about Umar Johnson and Tariq Nasheed again? Yeah. In Hidden Colors, I think it's the first one, Tariq Nasheed allows the misinformation that Mansa Musa was Montezuma. And I've seen people saying this not only on social media, but in real life. See, what it was Mansa Musa traveled over, and there the people started to call him Montezuma. Stop it. Stop it. Be honest about our achievements and be honest about what we've done historically. Because here's the thing about white folks, too. White folks could come and destroy a lot of that shit by just stating, like, are you serious? Mansa Musa was Montezuma? Really? And once they toppled that domino, everything else you believe to be credible from a Tariq Nasheed now is in question. Now it's in question. Go back and look at that so-called debate Tariq Nasheed did with, what's the white boy name again? Jared Taylor. That white supremacist asshole Jared Taylor. Tariq looked dumb. But you guys are Tariq stans. And what you guys need to understand is you can watch a Tariq. I've watched some of his stuff in the past, and from time to time I might catch a little something there. But Tariq to me is an entertainer. He's a joke. You watch him clown someone and you could get a good laugh off of that, you know. But for like your serious solutions to your very serious problems, you don't go to guys like that. You come here. You go to the Pro Black Perspective podcast with Onitase. Go on our Twitter and look at some of the people we interact with, especially Onitase. Look at the people we interact with. Those are the guys you want to go to for some knowledge. With me, you come, and if you have something to say, you've written something, go write something for Bitter Medicine blogs. Join the think tank. If you feel you're not quite up to snuff, because I know someone who's in the Bitter Medicine think tank who feels that, you know, she's not quite on some level. And my thing to that is read. I have the Bitter Medicine book club. We read gems. Carl Hezekiah and I do a monthly review of the books that we read each month. Gems. Gems that if you go on YouTube and look at the analytics, again, I have to get my analytics from Whitey at YouTube, I'm only getting, 60, 70 listens? And they probably have the algorithm so messed up, right? Because at the end of the day, they can't allow my voice to be heard a lot. They can't allow Onitase to be heard a lot. Because if you want to protect your domination, you can't let opposing voices be heard. So the algorithm is probably for shit, so that my video doesn't come up after you watch a Umar Johnson, after you watch a Tariq Nasheed, after you watch Moise Watkins. They probably have the algorithm set up that our videos are the furthest thing to come up after those videos are watched. I did a show some time ago talking about the necessity for STEM education. This is where we need to put our efforts. We need our engineers and our technologists to be building platforms that we can use, independent of Whitey and their algorithms. That's what we need. So we need you to take a more scientific approach to your situation. If you want to think science, here's my suggestions for you. Question everything. Question it all. Jay-Z told you that, and you guys thought it was a dope line, but hardly any of you actually internalize it and live it. Question what you observe, right? After you've questioned it and you've come up with some answers or you've come up with investigate further. Find out what's already known about your observations. And this is where we are lacking as a people. We don't have journals where some of our more intellectual leaders of the past especially. I mean, how dope would it be to have journal articles, journals that go back where Carlos Cooks does a research paper on supporting black business? How dope would that be to have a Marcus Garvey do a research paper about self-determination, and that's in a journal that you can go to a black library and pick it up and peruse through. How dope would it be to have a journal from the time when we had guys like Dr. Bobby E. Wright, Asa G. Hilliard, Walter Rodney. Unfortunately, what ends up happening is the things that could be somewhat a kind of a journal article, a research paper, a lot of these guys have to package together into a book. That's one of the projects I'm working on right now. Because there's no journal articles where I could, on a regular or semi-regular basis, put out research papers and findings on certain phenomenon within the black situation, I will just have to sit down and package all these thoughts together in a compendium of sorts into a book and put it out there. We should have been had, and that's a failing of our ancestors. Shall we fail the same way too? We should have been recognized that we need to look at our problems in a scientific way, present certain deliverables, scientific deliverables for our people to be able to go back and reference and cross-reference and update to see if it still holds true from Marcus Garvey's time to our time. We should have been had that kind of thing going on. We all can be social scientists. So like I said, you need to investigate further. You need to look at what the greats were talking about, what Garvey was talking about 100 years ago. Does it still apply exactly today? Do we need to add more? Do we need further research? That's what we have to start thinking. The next thing we got to do is we got to be skeptical more. We got to be skeptical about what we hear. There's no way we are supposed to hear Mansa Musa became Montezuma and buy that DVD just off that alone. Because now everything else comes into question. We got to be more skeptical. This is how people are running game on us. When I was young, I heard this hypothesis that honeybees use the sun to navigate. And a lot of you still repeat that stuff today. But here's a question. Well, how do bees navigate when it's overcast? You see what I'm saying? You got to be more skeptical. All of us have ideas. We have that gut instinct. We have, thoughts that have been pushed down on us from generations before, kind of traditional thoughts, We got to try to refute these ideas, even the ideas we come up with on our own. Look at things from the other side of the argument. Look at things from the other side of the argument. So that's question what you observe, investigate further, be skeptical, and try to refute your own ideas. We each don't have all the answers. And we can be wrong. You know? Seek out more evidence. I talked about evidence before, but seek it out again. Find others who have more knowledge. And at the end of the day, man, be more open-minded. Don't just assume because a white woman, a pathetic white woman who has a badge and a gun, ran up in a black dude's apartment because she was fucking him. And he didn't want to do it any further. I mean, that's basic. That's basic thinking. Do you think Whitey is just basic like that? And you know what? Until I heard the family said that wasn't the case, it was possible. Yeah, anything's possible. But that shit right there is basic. Think a little deeper. Be skeptical. Look at the evidence. Question everything. Before I go, I want to play one last advertisement. Listen to this.
Greetings, family. In case you didn't know, the Bitter Medicine Podcast hosts an online book club. Every month, we will select a book to inspire the Bitter Medicine Podcast listening audience to read along together. At the end of the month, we will host a call-in show book discussion live on YouTube. This is a great dynamic way for readers to not only enjoy a book, but also have others to bounce ideas off of. It's been said that if you want to hide anything from Black people, put it in a book. Do not allow this to be true anymore. Head over to www.bittermedicineblogs.com and subscribe to our newsletter for important updates. Do that today. Join our reading collective today and empower yourselves, your family, and your community. Peace.
One of the fundamental things to know about a scientist. If you want to think science, you have to understand who and what a scientist is. One of the fundamental things about scientists is they are readers. The more a scientist is a reader, the better science he or she does. The better outcomes they receive when they look to examine a particular problem. Be better readers. Join the book club today. This month of September, and we're going to announce the new books very soon in the next few days, the book for October. Right now we're reading Fighting for Honor, The History of African Martial Art Traditions in the Atlantic World by T.J. Desch, O.B. Great book so far. I'm halfway through it, just as we are halfway through the month. Join the book club. Read. Listen to people who have done a lot of reading before you and who can relate some of the best parts of books they've read in the past. That's how you will be able to better approach this life and these problems that we Black people suffer in this life from a scientific standpoint. Stop leaving everything up to white folks. White folks study you scientifically, not anecdotally. They study you scientifically. When you created blues music and white folks was railing against blues music and stuff like that, they gave themselves time. While they were railing against it, they gave themselves time to study it. To study it from a musicology standpoint, but also to study it from a numbers standpoint. They started to realize, wait, white folks are going down in these Black neighborhoods, risking life and limb to go down to the jukebox to listen to some blues music. Wait, there's an opportunity to make money here. By the time we sell this blues music, white people buying it, Black people buying it, we're going to make some money here. They study you scientifically. When you gave up the blues and you did rock and roll, they studied you again. They railed against that too. And the next thing you know, white folks was doing blues music, blue-eyed blues. White folks was doing rock music, and now they've turned it into something almost unrecognizable. Then you left that, and you went and you did R&B and soul. Well, of course, white folks soon followed doing R&B and blue-eyed soul too. Then you left that, you made house music. You made hip-hop. And now they're taking that from you too, because you don't scientifically look at the things that you create. They do. They do. When they created the internet, they took a scientific look and said, you know what, we call this thing the information highway. We should be able to monetize this. And they did. They did. When podcasting was a thing that the regular guy or gal did, radio and radio stations and the like, they scoffed at it. Oh, that's amateur business. You know what now? Every day, ESPN, all their television shows are podcasts. They're on YouTube. They've monetized YouTube. They're getting a little bit of that money from YouTube as well. The Breakfast Club is on YouTube. Probably more people watch The Breakfast Club probably on YouTube than they watch it on whatever station it's on, Centric or whatever it's on. So now if you were doing a hip-hop show as a podcaster, now you have to go up against those big dogs, iHeartRadio and Power 105.1. It's scientific. Think science. That's all for today. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you guys next week. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.